And to be honest, I've seen worse set of macro indicators and economic indicators in years. But that doesn't mean that it can't sustain itself for a period of time, a period of time. And trust me, the government is as busy as it can be trying to do that. Specifically, frankly, Janet Yellen versus Powell. But they're busy and they're doing a remarkable job to give the devil due of keeping things afloat. And as you can, looking at the market now, we're starting to push north of 4,200 on the S&P. We thought that was a market high, maybe, but when I look at the financial conditions index right now, which is loosening, and that's a shocker. It's just bringing people into the market, and then fear of missing out takes over, and we just keep going higher, but it won't last. That's the bottom line. It won't last because we've never had such a disconnect between the actual realities of the economics and how the market is now performing on the surface. And so if you're a money manager, you're pulling your hair out because all your old rules are not making any sense. And of course, you got to perform or you're going to lose, you're going to have redemptions. So it's a catch-22. And usually that's the beginnings of the end because you're forced in. And as you're forced in, suddenly the rug is pulled out historically. The question here is just how long do we go before the rug's pulled out, and what will trigger the pulling out of the rug? And to answer that, you have to understand why it's realistically going up. We've just pushed out, in terms of debt here, in 12 months, or maybe a little longer if I want to go back to the America Rescue Plan, but somewhere between $6 and $7.5 trillion. We just put through an omnibus bill for what, 1.7. We've got the Inflation Reduction Act was, I don't know, 740 billion. The CHIPS, 280 billion. Infrastructure bill, 1.2 trillion. That rescue plan was somewhere between 1.9, 3.5. I can just keep on going. What we're spending on Ukraine, we have never put this much money into an economy than ever before. And so we pushed up the debt ceiling. We're effectively going through that debt ceiling in a big way because a lot of that money we haven't yet. We've authorized it. Big chunks of it are being spent because that's why we're right at the debt ceiling right now, and it's forced Janet Yellen to implement extraordinary actions. And so this is going to be as big a fight for this debt ceiling as we've ever seen, potentially. Though there's a little bit of gamesmanship that's really going on because we've just had a significant change in the Congress. We have a Republican, and I don't know if you witnessed the election of the Speaker of the House went with 14, 15 rounds, and then eventually just saw, I don't mean to get political, but we saw the Freedom Caucus, a group take over it with some very, very strong hard money fiscal budget restraints to be put in place. So it'll be a protracted kind of period that we're going to go through to come up with a resolution of what that's going to be. You can be assured they will increase the debt ceiling, and the goal here will come in that they're going to agree to some budget, pull in the spending, probably extend the debt ceiling for 2 years. Maybe they concede 4 to 5, 6% of this year's spending of all of that money. So we shouldn't be worried about that. What we should be worried about, thinking about, is the game that's going on behind the scene. And that one of the reasons I put that particular report out that you're mentioning, Adam, is there's always more going on in the government than anybody's aware. And so what's happening here is Janet Yellen in the Treasury, and she's been playing a lot of games here to help Powell. Remember, she was the former chairman of the Federal Reserve herself. So the two, and he was at the Treasury before. So they both know each other's jobs and roles and how things really work very, very well. So what Yellen has been trying to do is buy time for the inflation rate to come down to something that's manageable, to allow Powell to increase the rates up until we get to about a 5% terminal rate, thereabouts. With the 25 now, we're very close, getting close to that. But just push it out so that inflation comes down. And she had to buy time, and she's done a good job. Now, how do we buy some more time here? And so what we have to understand is with the debt ceiling, she can't issue any more debt. She can issue some short-term bills, but she can't issue notes and bonds. So what that does is, because they're spending down what they call the TGA, and I don't mean to get technical, but it's important for you to understand what's going on in the market and why it's going up, and therefore why it'll come down. So they're pushing money out through the TGA, general account, of spending, but they're not financing it. They're spending it down. That's still keeping liquidity going into the economy, but they're not issuing any notes or bonds. And what that's doing is it's driving up the price of the bonds because there's a shortage of them. Look at the recent auctions. It pushes down the interest rate. So it's been holding down rates at the same time we've had this problem. And that's what's dramatically loosening, I mentioned earlier, the financial conditions index. And so as that financial conditions index come down, it's a license to chase the market. And that's what's going on. And it's overextended it quite significant. And it could be protracted out here because, as you well know, for the last 2 or 3 years, the market has just mapped perfectly the expansion of the Fed's balance sheet. And what this is doing, it's actually almost dollar for dollar offsetting the reduction in the quantitative tightening that's going on every month as we've been reducing it. And so they've got it set so it's a balancing act. So it's a license to print money right now, effectively, and get into the market. I didn't mean to be long-winded, but that's the root of it. It's going to end, though. Okay, they're buying time, hoping that inflation, which is coming down, gets down low enough that they can then stop the rates, and we'll get a soft landing, and everything would look like there's a possibility of getting a soft landing. My opinion, not going to happen. The soft landing, that is, it's going to be a brutally hard landing, but it's going to be later than everybody currently thinks, and we'll go into a very major deflationary push as it comes in. The other thing that's holding it up is, I've written extensively about stagflation, where you get high inflation, you get low growth, but you also need a third thing, and it's called unemployment. And we haven't been seeing the layoffs, bankruptcies, et cetera, that the media plays on, and they haven't been playing on that. And so when we start to see the unemployment numbers really showing is when it'll start to, the market will start to really fall. I just read here a few minutes ago that Dell's laying off 6,500, 6,600 people. And, there was a day when, 40,000, 60,000 we got into back in 2008. That's what we'd seen. But we live in a different world, and we always seem to, it's like fighting the last war with the old equipment. We're in a different war today. And so, for example, the question is, what is that layoffs at Dell as a percentage of their total employment? Well, it's 5%. Well, just a minute. When we went through in 2008, that's all we were laying off too. That is a huge amount because companies have downsized so tightly that now to take off any number of people is a big deal. So an example, Wolf Richter did a great study of this. He went through 102 companies in the Silicon Valley in only 3 counties, and all of them had layoffs. 102 companies doing layoffs in just 3 counties. But if you go through them all, they're 50, 100, 140, nothing to write home about, right? 8%, 12, 20% of their total employment base. And they're high paying jobs. These are the jobs that can afford the rents, afford the houses, upscale that really slows an economy. So it's happening, but it's not getting any visibility. And, we just had layoffs at Microsoft, at 15 to 20,000. We've seen it at Amazon, I think around 18,000. We've seen it at Facebook around, 10 to 12,000. Those are about as big as you can get. And they're considered small, but they have massive impacts to these companies. And now we're seeing their ability to deliver. Because when you're laying off these people, you may not be saving vast amounts of money on the employment line, but you're crippling the company. It's no longer fat. You're taking out bone, and so you're seeing the companies cutting major corners and not being able to perform anymore. And that's what we're watching. And when then we go to the next step, you'll start to see actual bankruptcies or takeovers. And it'll be a different way, but we see it's unfolding right now and will accelerate through June, July.